Over 250,000 people visit Farnborough each year to witness outstanding flying displays and to see the very latest British aircraft put through their paces. A show like this can't be seen anywhere else in the world, and yet, because it has become an annual event, we're inclined to take it for granted. Accustomed to the modern aeroplane, few of us bother to think about the tremendous amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to ensure that Britain's aircraft today are the most reliable and safe in the world. A few of us may marvel when a new invention hits the headlines, and for a time the newspapers will remind us of the achievement of perhaps one individual whose inventive genius made it possible. But no single person today could design and build an aeroplane for operational purposes on his own. It takes thousands of man-hours and often as many people working in teams to get an aircraft safely into the air, and behind the majority of this effort lies Britain's Ministry of Aviation. This is a big organization. In fact, it is so large that many of the employees themselves do not realize how great a contribution the ministry makes to the aeronautical world. But research and development are not confined exclusively to aeroplanes. The work is spread over a much wider canvas. This aircraft is landing at Farnborough, the Royal Aircraft Establishment, where within the fence exists virtually a scientific city. Here, scientists and technicians work with office personnel and service people in a common purpose. Expert teams perfecting existing designs, designing future developments. But Farnborough has been on the job a long time. In fact, its history dates back to the early pioneer days of aviation. After the Wright brothers succeeded in getting a heavier-than-air machine off the ground, many others took up the challenge of flying. Samuel Franklin Cody, an American, came to Britain, and in 1908 at Farnborough he built this biplane and flew it successfully, making him one of the first true aviators in this country. If you visit Farnborough today, you can see the tree to which he tethered his plane when engine testing. It is preserved as a memorial. During the First World War, the Vickers Vimy bomber was developed, and soon afterwards the Farnborough scientists were on the job trying out ways and means of refueling in mid-air, experimenting the hard and dangerous way in the sky. They were also concerned with safe flying. In those early days, a stall or a spin could prove fatal, and so scale models of the most up-to-date designs were tested in elementary wind tunnels, these experiments leading to the development of well-behaved aircraft. Their work sometimes took them to sea, but early aircraft carriers were dangerous places, particularly when arrestor wires and crash barriers did not exist. Even when hooks were devised, pilots sometimes had difficulty in landing squarely on the deck, and nasty accidents were not infrequent. But flying techniques could only be learnt the hard way. A slight error of judgment and you damaged your plane, although on most occasions you escaped shaken but unhurt. This accident, however, severely injured a ministry cameraman. But he is still working today, only now he uses a remotely controlled camera to obtain the scientific records which have contributed so much towards the development of safe landing techniques at sea. Experiments were then carried out to find a method of landing an aircraft safely without an undercarriage. The landing area on the flight deck was covered with large rubber sheets supported by air-filled cylinders, also made of rubber. For the initial trials, a mock-up deck was laid out at Farnborough, and it was a tough assignment for the pilot landing for the first time. And there are other tough jobs. Here, a man is deliberately blacking out during high-speed aerobatics while a cine camera records the details. Apart from the obvious medical interest, these experiments paved the way for research into ways and means of protecting pilots from the pull of gravity, leading to the development of modern pressurized flying suits. When ejector seats were devised, they had to be tested under actual flying conditions. When something is new, it is often an unknown quantity, and sooner or later someone must try it out for the first time. The initial trials will be made with a dummy, but a dummy has no feelings, so an observer will volunteer to obtain a physical reaction. In peacetime, he may seem heroic. But in wartime, thousands of men volunteered to join the parachute forces, and the Royal Aircraft Establishment went in for parachute research in a big way. Hundreds of jumps were organized so that studies could be made of the various designs and techniques. And the ministry staff went with them to record all the necessary information and data, filming every drop from an accompanying aeroplane and every landing from the ground, even though there was a fair chance that somebody might land on top of them. But parachutes could carry many other things besides men, and soon techniques were perfected for dropping an amazing variety of objects accurately onto a specified area. The equipment ranged from landmines and supplies to heavy-duty army trucks, and every drop was scientifically recorded and analyzed. It was also necessary to devise better and more accurate ways of launching bombs and aerial torpedoes from fast-flying aircraft. And a study was made of their behavior from the time they left the aircraft until they reached their target. Sometimes they were made to explode on impact, and sometimes they were made to penetrate heavy concrete before exploding. It was no easy job trying to follow a bomb dropped from a high altitude, but the slow-motion cine camera records proved to be a most valuable aid in this particular field of research because they could show details that the human eye could never hope to see in normal circumstances on the bombing range. At Shoebury-Ness, there is a different kind of range, a high-speed rocket runway, and it is used, for example, to find out what happens when a modern gas turbine engine collides in mid-air with light debris or perhaps a bird, in this case a dead chicken weighing 2 pounds. A rocket is fired and a striking velocity of 300 miles an hour is achieved before the brakes are applied. The results of the collision can then be analyzed at leisure, and it can be seen that even though the turbine blades were protected by a steel guard, there was considerable damage caused by the impact. And it didn't do the bird much good either. Here, 60-pound high-explosive rockets were launched at a concrete runway to discover whether or not they would explode if they were attached to an aircraft during a crash landing on an airfield. After a series of tests of this type, it was established that a pilot would not be harmed by these rockets, as there was no accidental detonation caused by the impact or friction. In the west of England, beneath the Malvern Hills, the Royal Radar Establishment is located, and here research is carried out on the very latest techniques in the field of electronics and radio location. Radar, once a wartime secret, is a household word today, and yet few people realize the tremendous advances which have been made in the design of and the uses for this equipment. Nevertheless, despite apparently simple operation, the relays and circuits are extremely complex. Malvern was also the birthplace of one of the largest solid-surface radio telescopes to be built in Europe, the tool of a new science, radio astronomy, and the link between man and his space satellites. The Royal Radar Establishment has its own aerodrome at Pershore and a fleet of aircraft to carry out practical experiments under active flying conditions. Sometimes a helicopter may be required for a particular trial, or perhaps a Canberra, but the aircraft are not always suitable, and in this case the nose was too small for the test equipment. So a design team got to work and planned a new nose for the Canberra. It was made up with fiberglass so that it would be both strong and roomy, yet extremely light in weight. At the same time, the radar equipment was wired up and the plugs and cables were prepared. Then a Canberra was brought inside for modification. The old nose was removed and the new one carefully fitted into place and the equipment installed. Within a short space of time, the aircraft was back in service again. In research of this type, it is sometimes necessary to know how electronic equipment will stand up to very heavy pulls of gravity, or G, encountered in modern high-speed flying, and so a centrifuge is used. The G is increased with the speed of rotation, and the equipment is kept working throughout the entire run. At very high altitudes, conditions of extreme cold are encountered, and so an ionosphere chamber is used to create those conditions artificially, and it is then possible to test radar equipment at ground level. Today, crystals are becoming an important part of electronic developments. Here, research is carried out on the development of crystals in an air-conditioned laboratory. The development work of the ministry, however, is not confined entirely to the establishments, and here is a project developed by a headquarters branch. It is an ingenious device for towing aircraft across marshy airfields. This skid wheel transporter prevents the undercarriage from sinking into muddy ground and enables the tractor to pull a heavy aeroplane at a fairly rapid pace with comparative ease. A conventional tow would almost certainly end with either the aircraft or the tractor being bogged down. From time to time, something out of the ordinary is required, and ministry staff are often responsible for original designs which are almost unique. Here at Boscombe Down, an aeroplane is being driven into a field, only at the moment the machine is neatly packed into the back of the van. This is virtually a build-it-yourself plane, and it comes in 3 large bundles. The fuselage is made of wooden struts which are covered with canvas, and the simple undercarriage is clipped on and locked into place by these pin clips. The complete aeroplane can be assembled by only 2 men in approximately 1 hour. The engine is extremely light in weight, although it has enough power to carry a pilot and an observer for quite long distances and at a reasonably high altitude. The controls, including throttle and ignition switches, are all mounted on this tiny compact panel. Every part has been planned with the utmost efficiency, keeping the weight down to an absolute minimum, yet simplicity has been the keynote throughout design. This is the wing. It's made of rubber sections cemented together in a similar way to a wartime barrage balloon. It is an interesting fact that it was developed in the balloon sheds at Cardington, where the ill-fated R-101 airship was built over a quarter of a century before. But instead of gas, it is inflated with air supplied by a manual pump. It takes about 20 minutes to fill, and should a leak occur in flight, a pump will automatically maintain pressure. It is possible for one of the 2 men to drive home in the van, and if the other has a pilot's license, he can free the brakes, open the throttle to its fullest extent, pull the stick back, and take off with the utmost ease. He might even fly home to await the arrival of his companion with the mobile hangar or van. This machine could be the forerunner of the family plane for weekend flyers. But have we enough sky for them?